All right, so in the last demo, I did a rough sketch, just looking and stealing colors and just kind of reacting to what I saw. In this one, this is another way you can get started, but it's just important to get started. I'm going to do an analytical sketch. And this will be more like drawing it out with pencil, not in a detailed way because this isn't digital coloring and I'm definitely not inking any outlines. But what I'm going to do is look at the face here. And there's a few ways I can do it. In fact, I usually use a light blue for portraits because that's kind of what our veins are doing underneath our skin anyway. And I'm going to make my brush a lot smaller to go to this low resolution image. And I'm going to make a new layer here. Remember, I'm just staying on the brush tool. But I'm going to go ahead and trace basic shapes right over my reference. And let's look at the other photo I have. There we go. And I'm going to do it to both of these. So I'm going to draw the kind of circle for his cranium, which a lot of it's off the page, unfortunately. I'm going to find his eye line, which will line up with the top of his ears. I'll find the bottom of his nose, which will line up with the bottom of his ears, and how that curves around. Right? I'm going to get the big shape of his nose, which is so prominent in this photo and in his older face. The overall kind of shape of his eyelids, the placement of his pupil. And what I notice as I'm kind of diagramming his basic shapes, analyzing them, is I'm noticing the distances where there's a lot of space. And there are certain rules, and sometimes I teach those. If you go back into my older painting demos in YouTube, you'll see there are rules that there are 5 eyes across the front of the face. There's 1 eye width in between the eyes, that the mouth is usually 1/3 down. But these are just the standards that are true as averages of people's human faces. What's nice about knowing those averages is that you get to see where someone deviates from it. So James Baldwin deviates by having a lot of space between the bottom of his nose and his upper lip. And so that's what gives him a lot of his recognition. And then his hairline is actually really high. And his brow line, which would usually just be 1/3 above to the top of his head, is quite high as well, is almost halfway. His ear, and again, basic shapes, where his neck connects, where his collar is, and the angle of his shoulders. All of these will help. Then what I can do is I can take those and I can just put them and grow them right onto my canvas. And that's one way to kind of analyze it. Right? And I can use that as a map for painting. And then I can do things like, of course, complete his head. If you want to get back to the move tool, which can be helpful, you just hit Command even when you're in the brush. And I can always Command T, shrink it down into the space a little bit more. I like his chin being pretty close to the bottom, but maybe not as close as I had it. So maybe that's about the right size. And so maybe this is more accurate, than this, for sure. Right? Just to show you that again, let's do it on this reference. It's good to have multiple reference to really kind of analyze and warm up. I want the brush tool. I don't want it so big. So I'm going to go on this one. I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to trace the basic shapes. I get the whole circle here. I get to see more from the front of the face. The eyes go right in the middle of the head, from the top of the cranium to the bottom of the chin. It's a very prominent chin. And when he smiles like this, he widens out at the cheeks. His eyes feel big in the head, but there is one eye width between. The nose goes beyond the size of the eyes. And that's because the nostrils do that, not the nasal cavity. He has this kind of coat hanger, smile lines with his hairline. So I could also take that, move it on. That reference was really small, but it doesn't matter. This is just a sketch. I can scale it up. And I can use this. So notice that those two line up really well to make it look kind of trippy in 1980s computer graphicsy. I can change its saturation to more magenta. There we go. And now you can see how they line up. It's like face off. So if you're observing the person correctly, it doesn't even matter what angle their head is at. What you're looking at is the spacing between their eyes, the bottom of their nose, their mouth, their chin, the top of their head, their hairline. Does that make sense? So my portrait is going to be somewhere in between these two. Something like that. And what I'm going to do is actually merge those together. As crazy as that is, because then I can manipulate it. So I'm going to hold down Option. Actually, I can just select both these layers. No, I'll hold down Option. Hold down Option and say Layer Merge Visible. So I have a new layer here that's combined of these two. Then what I can do is turn on my speed painting or shape painting layer. Let's turn the opacity down a little bit on that. Unlock it, make a duplicate of it, because why not? It's digital. And then, this is the beauty of digital, I can warp it to fit into that map. And I'll get an instant better likeness, even if I didn't observe it correctly. It's like pulling dough, getting it to fit the right shape. Now, it's not quite as easy as I make it sound. You need to have some experience and practice with drawing faces and knowing where to look for things. And this is my first time trying this exact technique, but it should work. And it doesn't matter that we're growing and softening our pixels because we're still in the sketch phase. So now, I have a speed painting that's also aligned with the basic shapes I traced. Make sense? Pretty neat. Now let's see, is that a better likeness than this? Absolutely. Does it still feel kind of like a caricature? Absolutely. Right. So there's lots of ways you can play with it. But this is what I'll now work from. And if I want to get really photorealistic with it, I'm going to really adjust it within these parameters. But I think more, I'm just going to adjust it as I paint. So let me turn off the layers I don't find helpful. And get to work. And I can turn off these layers. They're there to help me if I need them. And this is a good time to save my work. Save it there, and now save these, because these are also now multi-layered files with my tracings over them. So I'll save those as TIFFs with LZW. Okay, now I can go back to this one, and I can start just painting, having fun with my brush. I'm going to make it a lot bigger, so I'm at much higher resolution here. Still keep pretty big. Let's keep the opacity quite high. And now, let me just label my layers quickly so it all makes sense to you. And this is my combined analytical sketch. And I'm going to keep those above everything so I can always check in if I'm getting way off of my map. And now this layer is going to be my more targeted painting. It's not refined yet, but now I'm really going to start putting the shapes in. So this is now my underpainting. I can lock that. Keep locking the wrong layer. There we go. Now my targeted painting is going to start defining these structures a little bit more. And I steal color. And even though I'm still using a big brush at a high opacity, not 100% opacity, but close. In fact, I might go a little bit down, maybe to 80. Now I'm actually going to get more into the structures. Like shaping exactly how he's looking at us. And where his eye ends. Where the white of his eye ends. And the eyelids continue. And then this is where in most tutorial videos it would just go to a speed painting, because you can spend a lot of time doing this and kind of exploring your subject matter and getting it right. And of course you're going to make lots of mistakes. That's okay. You just hold down Option to select colors. And what I love about digital painting is you get to be brave because you know that you're doing it all on a new layer. And you can always, start over, you can always erase it, but it's better to just react and work with it. Because I'm still getting a sense of what kind of colors I'm going to use, the depth of my shadows. It's good to put in a darkest dark pretty early on, so I did that. Because otherwise your whole kind of color value system can get a little off. Move his eye up a little bit. Like how he has blue in his eye. There's no right or wrong way to do it. But my strong advice is avoid the pitfall of getting trapped into details too early. So I'm framing the eyes, but I am not going to try to finish the eyes or make lots of really cool highlights or anything yet. Because you don't want to lose sight of the whole thing. And I'm still a long ways from just getting the proportions right. Getting everything blocked in. And that's where animals are more forgiving. Right? At this stage, if this was just a painting of an animal, I could go all out on trying to create the texture of the fur, play with different brushes, play with different opacities. But for James Baldwin here, I'm still trying to get the little specifics of his face and become more familiar with them. Which details, which colors are most important. And what I love most about using just a mostly opaque setting, like 80%, is that I'm always mixing new colors as I go. So whenever I bring a color in and put it down, it's a new color I can steal, and then I can get 80% of that color, mix it with what's behind it. It's a new color I can steal. I do recommend the gray background. That helps a lot. Notice how washed out it will look with the white background. So gray helps you make better value choices. That's why artists tend to tone their canvas or their artboard before they paint. This smile line seems to be